this podcast, Examining the XFL. I am your host, MJ Hurley, and before we get started, I'd just like to briefly introduce myself, since you're going to be listening to me talk for the next 45 minutes. I'm a sports communication major at Bradley University, which is in Peoria, Illinois. I also have minors in political science, journalism, and professional writing. But that's enough about me. I'd like to get into talking football. So, the XFL, which is what this podcast is going to be about. Today's episode is going to be a little bit of an introductory to the XFL, and then we're going to do some deep diving into the past of a couple players, and throughout this season of the XFL, every single week we're going to be talking to these same players. So today I want you to just get to know them, get to know their background, get to know their history, because I think that's very important in order for you to understand their opinions on the game, because they all have different backgrounds, they all have different experiences in terms of their experience in professional football, and I think that's very important to look at before we get into talking pure football. However, we're going to get to that a little bit later. Right now, for those of you who don't know about the XFL, this is a alternative professional football league that is currently owned by Vince McMahon. Now, one of the most important things to recognize is that the XFL is not just another alternative professional football league that has come to fruition. One of the most important things to look at is it isn't one of the leagues like the AAF that failed last year with $48 million filed in bankruptcy. The XFL actually is a league that was attempted in 2001 by Vince McMahon. Now, at that time, one of the biggest problems that the general public, and especially in the United States, had with the XFL is that Vince McMahon, who was from the WWF, now the WWE, kind of tried to turn it too much into a professional wrestling type league. And not in terms of actually making it into wrestling, but he tried to make it that type of production instead of just focusing on the game. Now, in 2001, there was one single season of the XFL. They tried a lot of different things. They tried scantily clad cheerleaders. They tried having outrageous rules for the game, and they had performances by people like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson during the game, announcing on the sideline, trying to get the fans hyped up. However, one of the most important things they failed to do is prepare, and that's something the XFL has done a lot better this year. So the 8 teams that are currently involved in the XFL are the Dallas Renegades, the DC Defenders, the Houston Roughnecks, the Los Angeles Wildcats, the New York Guardians, the St. Louis Battlehawks, the Seattle Dragons, and the Tampa Bay Vipers. Now, those are the 8 teams. They are also recently introducing to the XFL something called Team 9, which, if you think about it in terms of the NFL, is basically going to be a practice squad for all of these teams. The XFL hasn't truly defined it yet, but that is something that I think is going to be very interesting in terms of possibly being similar to a G League in the NBA, where this is a team that people can go to if they're not actually on an XFL roster, not in an NFL roster, but they can be called up if injuries do occur, as obviously they will during a professional football season. Now, the 8 teams in the XFL are going to be divided into 2 conferences, the East and the West. The East teams are going to be the DC Defenders, the New York Guardians, the St. Louis Battlehawks, and the Tampa Bay Vipers, with the West being rounded out with the Dallas Renegades, the Houston Roughnecks, the Seattle Dragons, and the LA Wildcats. These 8 teams will play in a 10-week regular season and a 2-week postseason that will culminate with a championship game, and that game will be held on April 26th. Now, I think another important thing to recognize, that now that we have a little bit of background of the XFL, is the support that the XFL is getting on social media. Now, obviously, it's 2020. Social media is a very large thing when it comes to sports. I think that's one of the areas that the NFL and the NBA do a lot better than, say, sports like the MLB and NHL, is they're very good at marketing their sport and marketing their stars to the general public. Now, I'm on Twitter a lot, and one of the things I often have complained about to other people in the sports industry is that if somebody walked up to Mike Trout on the street, for those of you who don't know, he's one of the best players in Major League Baseball. If Mike Trout walked up to people on the street very few people would know who he was. But if LeBron James walked up to you, it would be very hard to find someone in this country who has any knowledge of sports that wouldn't know that is LeBron James. So kind of along those lines, the XFL actually has a large amount of social media support. On Twitter, they have 227,000 followers. On Instagram, they have 231,000 followers. And on Facebook, a platform that is not generally known for sports media content, they have 120,000 followers. So although there was a very large amount of support initially in 2001 for the original XFL, with 5.8 million people tuning into the first XFL game, now in 2020, everybody knows, if you're in the sports world, you know the history behind the XFL. You know the fact that it failed miserably after the first year. So with that in mind, the XFL has done a fantastic job of marketing themselves. They're marketing themselves as, hey, you think that football is done with the last snap of the Super Bowl in February. That's not it. Football is not over. And immediately after the Super Bowl, the XFL did a fantastic job of getting themselves going on Twitter, getting themselves going on social media. And I think that's something very important because the younger generation really needs to catch on to the sport. Now, something I also saw is I've been in some Facebook groups regarding the XFL, and I've seen a lot of people who want to be following the XFL because of their anger towards the NFL. The NFL isn't the game it used to be. It is a game where there's not as hard-hitting players, and while that may not be something that the older generation who likes the old hard-hitting NFL may get in the XFL, what they are going to get is a lot of action. And the reason for that is because the XFL actually has a lot of rule changes, and that's what I want to look at now, is how that exactly is going to impact the XFL positively. Now, the first thing that I find very intriguing is the XFL is going to have the ability for a double forward pass. Now, we're going to get to this a little bit later in some of my interviews with the players, but I think that is something that could be very intriguing. However, with all of these players not only preparing to play in the NFL, but some of them have NFL experience, and obviously high school, college football, there's not a double forward pass. I think that eventually that will become something very exciting, but at the current time, I don't think many teams initially in their first games are actually going to implement that, simply because of the novelty of it and the idea that players haven't practiced this before. It's not part of their muscle memory. It's not part of their intuition when they're on the field. So I think eventually that could become quite interesting. And personally, that's the rule I am going to be looking at the most when I'm watching XFL games. However, I don't think initially it's going to be something that's utilized maybe as much as it should. Now, the thing that I think is going to be the most impactful on the actual results of XFL games is going to be what the XFL calls the comeback period. Now, normally in the NFL, there's a 40-second play clock. So pretty much at the 2-minute warning, if the winning team has possession of the ball and the losing team has no timeouts, they can pretty much kneel out the clock, and the opposing team doesn't even have a chance to come back. However, in the XFL, after the 2-minute warning in each half, essentially what they're doing is they're cutting the play clock to 20, which means that until the play clock is at a minute and the opposing team has no timeouts, the winning team cannot simply kneel and run out the clock. This is going to be very important for XFL teams, providing quick comeback times if their offenses allow it. Now, obviously, that is something that their up-tempo offenses are going to have to adapt to with that in mind, and the defenses will have to adapt as well, which I think will be something very important. That quick play clock is something that players are simply not used to. So both on the offensive and the defensive side of the ball, I think that the comeback period is going to be not only the most impactful, but also the most interesting, the most exciting part of the rule changes for XFL fans. Now, there are also a couple of different changes. After scoring a touchdown in the NFL and in college, you have the choice to either kick an extra point from a certain distance, or from a shorter distance, you can go for a 2-point conversion. In the XFL, there are no extra points kicking-wise. You now, in the XFL, have 3 choices. You can go for a 1-point conversion from the 2-yard line, a 2-point conversion from the 5-yard line, or if you want to go big, you can do a 3-point conversion from the 10-yard line. Basically, what this means is, let's say a team is up by 21 points, which in the NFL means you are down by 3 scores. In the XFL, not anymore. Now, because you have the opportunity for up to a 9-point play, you can come back a lot quicker. Yes, it's still a 3-score game, but now that third score could potentially be a field goal instead of an additional touchdown. That will feed into the comeback period, feed into the exciting pace of play of the XFL that they really want to push. They want to do a different brand of football, something that the NFL and college game has not been able to provide to their fans. That's where I think they're actually going to bring a lot of interest into the game, and a lot of fans will see that that is a much more intriguing way to play football. I'm not going to say right now, without seeing the league and how it develops, that it's going to be a better way to play football. But personally, as a fan, I'm not a huge fan of the whole 13-10 game that you see in the NFL, where the last 8 minutes are teams simply running down the clock, and then the last 2 minutes, with no timeouts left for the losing team, the victorious team simply runs out the clock and rides off into the sunset. While for the winning team, that's fantastic. I think that's extremely frustrating as a Green Bay Packers fan who's been on the losing side of a fair amount of those games. That's something that I really will be excited to see in the XFL in this inaugural season. Now that we have some of the rules and the background hammered down of the XFL, I think it's time to look at some of the bigger name players that are going to be involved in the XFL in their inaugural season. So the first player I want to look at is Christine Michael, who is a running back for the St. Louis Battlehawks. Christine Michael has been a running back in the NFL since 2013 when he was drafted by the Seattle Seahawks in the second round. He took over for Seattle a couple years later. However, he really never caught on. He always seemed to be someone who would have one big fantasy game a year, and everyone would get very excited about him, but he never truly produced over an entire NFL season. He latched on with the Packers a little bit later in his NFL career, but it never really caught on for Christine Michael. So now he's a 29-year-old running back for the St. Louis Battlehawks, and I believe he's going to be a very large impact player for that team. He's somebody who knows the game well. He's extremely talented, very quick, a good pass catcher out of the backfield, and I think he's somebody who's going to make a very large impact for that Seattle team. Then the second player I want to highlight is Will Sutton. Will Sutton is currently 28 years old. He entered the NFL in 2014 as a high draft pick for the Chicago Bears. Will Sutton appeared in 36 games for the Chicago Bears until unfortunately he hurt his ankle in 2016 and eventually was cut by the team. Now, Will Sutton actually appeared in training camp a couple times for the Minnesota Vikings and the San Francisco 49ers, but again, unfortunately, he did not make their final 53-man rosters. Now, as a Green Bay Packers fan, I saw plenty of Will Sutton in the couple years he was with the Chicago Bears, and frankly, he terrorized Aaron Rodgers with his explosive pass-rushing style. He also did a very good job of terrorizing the run game, although the Packers didn't really have one during those years. Will Sutton did a very good job of ensuring that they had even less of one. So after Will Sutton was unfortunately denied by the Minnesota Vikings and San Francisco 49ers, he caught on in the AAF and played for the Arizona Hotshots before the league went bankrupt later that year. So for Will Sutton, it is now XFL time, and he will be playing for the Seattle Dragons, who are playing on opening day on Saturday against the DC Defenders, who are hosting the Dragons. You can also find that game at 2 p.m. Eastern on ABC if you want to watch some XFL action. Later that night, the Houston Roughnecks are also facing the LA Wildcats at 5 p.m. Eastern. You can catch that game on Fox. I personally will be watching both of these games. It'll be a very nice, relaxing Saturday afternoon, and I'm very excited to watch players like Will Sutton get their chance in the XFL. Now, the next player I want to talk about is Cardale Jones, who's going to be the quarterback for the DC Defenders. Cardale Jones was a very big name coming out of college. He was a quarterback for Ohio State. He was a fourth-round draft pick of the Buffalo Bills, who really needed a quarterback. They were playing with E.J. Manuel and Tyrod Taylor at the time, both of whom really never could win that quarterback competition. When he didn't catch on in Buffalo, he went to the LA Chargers, but of course with Phillip Rivers in town, he never really got a chance. So the 27-year-old Cardale Jones is now on his way to the XFL, and I believe that he will do a very good job. Although he does appear to be a little bit overweight at the moment, he's listed at 6'5", 255 pounds on the XFL roster, and he has looked a little bit out of shape in training camp. He's been out of the league for a while, and I think that after getting back into the game, Cardale Jones, who has very good experience playing under minds like Urban Meyer in Ohio State, and then playing with the Buffalo Bills and playing under Phillip Rivers for a couple years, I think Cardale Jones can make a very big impact in the XFL. And the last player I want to talk about is somebody that I think everybody who is interested in the XFL knows about. That's Landry Jones, who's the quarterback for the Dallas Renegades. Now, I believe that this match of Landry Jones and Bob Stoops, who's the head coach for the Dallas Renegades, is going to be a very fantastic match. Bob Stoops is an old Oklahoma coach, and I believe he will do a very good job of taking Landry Jones, playing to his strengths, and making sure that that offensive unit works as a whole. Now, a little bit background on Landry Jones. He probably is the biggest name that the XFL has currently because for a while it looked like he was poised to be the replacement for Ben Roethlisberger when they took him in the 4th round in 2013, the Pittsburgh Steelers did. Unfortunately, in 2018, in September, the Pittsburgh Steelers and Landry Jones parted ways, and Pittsburgh actually ended up going with Mason Rudolph as their primary backup, who played for a while this year with Ben Roethlisberger out injured. So with 30-year-old Landry Jones now in Dallas with the Dallas Renegades, I believe that, like I said, he was a prestigious quarterback at Oklahoma, so he knows the system that Bob Stoops used to run. Granted, it's a little bit different now under different leadership in Oklahoma. However, very similar play styles. So I believe Landry Jones, with that fit with Bob Stoops in Dallas, is going to be a very lethal combination in the XFL. So now that we know a little bit about the background of the XFL, some of the exciting rule changes that are going to be put in place to make the game even more fast-paced and high-scoring than you've seen in college and the NFL, and we've highlighted some of the premier players that are going to be starring for teams across the XFL, I think it's time to get into the interviews with the players that have agreed to be on this podcast every single week with us, that are going to go along with the XFL week by week and show us every single week some of the things that they saw during the game. We're going to highlight some of their performances, and most importantly, we're going to get in-depth insights and analysis from players who are actually on the field. While I may know more than the average guy about football, it is absolutely better to get the perspective of somebody who is on the field in the middle of the battle and the action, and that's what we're going to do today. So the first person we're going to have on our show today is Cole Boozer. Cole is an offensive lineman for the DC Defenders. He is number 69. He is 6'5", 306 pounds. He went to Temple College, and he spent some time with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the XFL. So I'm going to welcome Cole onto the show, and we will go from there. If you could just tell me a little bit, Cole, about your background, like what got you into playing football in the first place? Like, what made you fall in love with the sport?
My dad played football, both collegiately and partially had like a couple tryouts in camp, and like I was, after hearing about that and wanting to follow my dad's footsteps, and then also the physicality of the game. I used to be, before I was an offensive lineman, I was a tight end, so catching touchdowns, but really being physical in both the run game and the pass game, for sure. That's some of the reasons why I really enjoyed football and stuff, but what really got me into the game. And some of the stuff you do on the field, you can't even do in real life. So.
Absolutely. So, if you can, talk to me about your career arc. So you started playing, obviously, I assume when you were a kid because of your dad. So what was kind of the path that your career has followed to today playing in the XFL?
The whole career?
Yeah.
My whole career so far? Okay, so first started playing when I was about 9 years old for a rec league near me called Cockeysville Eagles in Maryland. Then from there I went to my school called Loyola Blakefield, and where I got like most of my interest from colleges. I only had one scholarship offer coming out of college, coming out of high school. It was to Temple University, which I love Philly, and after I'm done playing, I might have to actually move to Philly because I just love it so much stuff to do. from there, I played tight end. I was recruited as a tight end. Played there for 4 years. My 5th year, I put on 25 pounds my senior season to become a tackle because the team needed another tackle, and so I was like, sure, whatever's best for the team. Then from there, after 1 year of playing, I signed a free agent deal during the draft, but just pretty much after the draft, to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I was there from 2018 to this past year during camp. I got cut, but I was there the whole year for that. And then after that, I came back home. After I got cut, I was training for another fall, and while I was doing that, I was coaching my local high school, Willow Blakefield, myself as a line coach, and then my agent told me about the XFL, and I thought that was a great opportunity for me to get more film out there, especially because of how young I am at the position. So that's my goal for the year, is to really get more film and get back to the NFL. But I think the XFL, with all its opportunities and the new innovations that they put into the game, I think that this will be a very good league in the long run. So that's my career arc so far.
Okay. So kind of going off of that, why the XFL is doing a lot of things like the double forward pass that is not normal in football.
No.
So what do you think along those lines? How do you think that's going to be either a good thing or a bad thing for the XFL in terms of their success in helping out the players?
I think, in the sense of the double pass or innovations, or are you saying in the sense of like the game, like the league itself?
Kind of both, in a sense. Partially in the sense of their innovations and the rule changes, but also just the fact that it's an alternative to the NFL, so in some sense like a stepping stone.
I think that the NFL will take upon some of these innovations. Actually, what's it called? You know, the cameras that go above the games. I forget what they're called. That fly above the field.
Above the field. Yeah.
Yeah, that was an XFL thing, and they took that from the XFL, like that. So I think that some of the innovations, especially the new kickoff rule, with all the concussions and stuff happening in the NFL, I think, to be honest, they might inundate the new kickoff to them, but we'll see what happens. But just all the cool stuff like the headsets for all the skill players makes the game go faster, more enjoyable. But we'll see on February 8th when we play Seattle how this really will all shake out after the innovation stuff like that they put into the game.
Yeah. For you personally, how do you think, because you're an offensive lineman, how do you think the double forward pass will affect your play? Like, how does it affect the way you have to block everything?
For us, it'll be interesting to say the least, because you can't go downfield, but you also have to kind of sell the run a little bit so you're not blocking forever against the defense. So, it'll be interesting to say the least. I can't really touch completely on the subject because I'm not a skill position, and how much more that would probably affect them more than it would affect me.
Yeah.
Other than the fact that other than having to block a lot longer and making my job a little more difficult, to be honest.
Well, that's fair. So you guys play February 8th against the Dragons, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so what is your expectation for that game, and what's kind of the I don't want to say vibe, but like how is the team feeling about the first game? Are you guys excited? Like, what's the
everyone's very excited to finally to get after it now. We as a team I mean, we played them we actually had a preseason game against them, and I think we're really excited because I think we can do really well against them, especially with our personnel, with our running backs, our quarterback, Cardell, and our receivers. I think our offense is going to do really well, and everyone's super excited for the first game coming up in like 6 days.
Okay. Let's see. So, a couple more questions and then we'll be good. One question I have is, for a lot of people, I mean, obviously your ultimate goal is to get to the NFL. But do you have any career aspirations or just any goals at all outside of football that have either impacted your game or just like has impacted you personally?
Sure. So I'm actually, when I was at Temple for my 5th year, I graduated in 3.5 years. So I had time to go into other studies, and I actually got into my master's program in sports business. So I got to see the other side behind the game and like what goes into game day and, you know, the facilities and stuff like that. And I'm happy that Temple could grant me so I can get more not grant me, but let me have the opportunity to see that side of football and sports like that. So from there, I think I'm going to try to see, like I said, I only have a couple classes left, but definitely from there to, that's definitely impacted in seeing like what the people behind the, I don't want to say the stripe, but behind the back of the field. But yeah, I think that's helped me a lot in that sense.
Yes, that makes sense. I mean, I can say just being a student in college, I could not even imagine the work that you had to go through and the dedication with being a student athlete. I mean, I know people talk about it all the time, and it's something that people on social media, they seem to respect it. But just the amount of work I feel like I have to go through as a normal student, I can't even imagine also being a Division I athlete. So that's very cool that you've been able to get into that side. My last question, what were you going to say?
No, you're good.
Okay. My last question would be, you said you've been coaching high school a little bit in your downtime. Is that something you want to do more of in the future, and is that something that has helped you in your playing? Not only having from the business side, but the coaching side as well.
So one of the reasons I was trying to stay in coaching was, or not to stay in coaching, but to coach for my high school while I was home, other than to help out, is to keep my mind sharp on the game a little bit. You know, as an offensive lineman, not many people know this, but you have to kind of know coverages because then you figure out where blitzes are coming from. And so seeing that side, and I really enjoyed the giving back to these kids and giving back to my high school because I have a lot of experience, and I think that me being there gives some of these kids an opportunity and some sense of how to get to a certain spot to become a student athlete in college and earn a scholarship. And I think that I really would like to in the future. My goal would be to get into coaching because I just like giving back and I enjoy the sport and I have so much to give in that sense. So that's one of the things why I believe that, like, you know, coaching for me was a big help for my game, for sure.
Well, I know those kids are definitely very happy to have you as a coach. I can tell you that.
So before we move on from what you heard from Cole Boozer, offensive lineman for the DC Defenders, I want to highlight something that he said that you're going to see as a kind of central theme throughout these 3 interviews. So, like I said earlier in the podcast, what I want to do in today's episode is simply let you get to know not only the XFL, but also the players that we're going to be following through this 10 to 12 week process. So the most important thing in doing that is getting to know the players themselves, not just how they are as football players, but how they are as people. So one of the things that Cole said in his interview is how he really enjoyed coaching in his downtime between his time with the Buccaneers and his time now playing in the XFL. And I think that's very important, that when we're watching the XFL, one of the most important things to recognize is that these are not just football players, these are people. And for them, football is their well-being, football is their job. And they're going to be fighting day in and day out, not only to keep their spots in the XFL, but also to show the National Football League that they still have what it takes to be a professional, high-skilled, high-talent football player. And I think that is very important. So while Cole does have aspirations outside of football, he does have his business and his sports management side that he wants to go into, where he can look at the business side of football as well as on the field. I think it's very important to see that he is also a person who has coached high school football. He has that servant heart, and I think that's very important to understand going forward when we're looking at some of these other players. Not just look at how they are as football players, but look at how they are as people and how that impacts them on the field and how that has shaped their game and their life through their experiences that they had before they were even involved in professional football. So next up, you're going to be hearing from Ray Bolden, who is a wide receiver for the Houston Roughnecks. He's number 13. He's a 5'9", 165 wide receiver from Stony Brook College, and I'm very excited for you guys to hear what Ray has to say. He has a lot of very interesting insights, and I think what he said was very profound in terms of what he has learned from the game of football and how the game of football has impacted his life.
So, Ray, the first question I have for you is pretty simple. What got you into playing football? Kind of where does your passion for the game come from?
I actually started super late, honestly, and for me it was I kind of grew up in an area where I guess you could say like that opportunity to go to college, to kind of want more wasn't something that was like a reality for me or something that I didn't see too often. So growing up, I kind of always knew I wanted a way to make it to school and alleviate, that kind of pressure from my mom. I got into football, I think my junior year of high school, and, I had some coaches that kind of invested in me, and, that was the first time I could say I really kind of started having like a father figure in my life through football, through coaches, the relationships I built. So for me, it was definitely much bigger than the game, and it was personal reasons as to why I kind of like started to cling to it. And once I had the right coach that invested in me, I kind of committed myself to the game, and it just provides a lot of special opportunities, created a lot of great relationships. So.
That's fantastic. So kind of along those lines, so you said you started playing in high school. From there until now, can you kind of describe to me your career arc and basically what has led you to today playing in the XFL for Houston?
Man, they definitely took big strides. And I moved to Texas when I was 14, so football is a huge thing. And for me, I wasn't really into sports. So I always like to go back to, I said I had certain coaches that invested in me and, taught me more so about commitment and making a decision to do or be something. So, that's kind of where I get my work ethic and kind of committed to the craft and it's just through those kind of like qualities that I've developed is made my career kind of like take off. Certain different aspects. I went to college on a full ride scholarship, became one of the leading wideouts in school history. Got, now 3 different opportunities to play football professionally. So, it just goes back to the foundation that, that was instilled in me when I first started, playing the game. I just kind of stay true to it and it's all kind of worked out in my favor. So, just trying to keep climbing, man. Obviously, it's definitely a special opportunity. So, trying to make the most of it and, hopefully attain the overall goal that I set out for myself.
Absolutely. So you said you've had 3 opportunities to play professionally. I assume one of those is the XFL. Can you expand upon what the other 2 were?
Well, the first one was the camp invite in Philly, and going into it, everyone kind of knew, I had broke my foot, the last game of my senior year, so I wasn't even thinking I was going to be given the opportunity at all. And, prior to pro day, I had, conversations with a couple different organizations. And, I knew going into whatever camp I was going into, it wasn't going to be a real opportunity. Solely for one reason, I wasn't really, able to showcase much due to my health. But, after the mini camp, in Philly, rehab for, a couple of months, and then I got a call up to Canada, and that was my first real, stint professionally, with Coach June Jones, actually. He's the OC there. And, once he stepped down, he played a major factor in the, why I wanted to face the opportunity. So, when he stepped down and told me he's going to be taking the head coach's job here, that I definitely, we spoke on it, and he told me he'd have an opportunity for me down here in Houston, and hopped on board, and now this is where I am.
Fantastic. So now that you're in the XFL, it's obviously a much different league than the NFL. Partially just in its nature, there's only 8 teams, so you're going to be playing a lot. You're going to be playing teams more often, possibly, and also in the rule changes. So as a wide receiver, how do you think rule changes like the double forward pass opportunity, how is that going to affect the way that you personally play the game?
I can't speak from personal experience, because, June, he has a real set in stone offensive philosophy, and I mean, if you look at his track record, you understand why. So, we really just teach fundamentals and learning our team, and we really haven't changed anything about, his approach offensively due to, the rule changes and dip opportunities and things like that. So, I mean, the biggest thing for us is like the extra points, 1, 2, 3-pointers. So we definitely, we spend a lot of time working our red zone offense and things like that. But in terms of things like the double forward pass, it's like that is not really in our game, so to say. So.
Okay, and then the other rule change that personally I'm very interested in is what XFL calls the quote-unquote comeback period. So basically, I'm sure you know, but for those people who don't, the game clock stops with 2 minutes left in the second quarter and 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and the clock stops after every play instead of the clock running after like a one play or a pass completed inbound. So for you as an offensive player, does that kind of excite you that you're going to get more opportunities in the last couple minutes of the game in prime time to kind of showcase your skills?
Oh yeah, definitely. Because I mean, in those situations, 2-minute offense, hey, you're looking to throw the ball. So I mean, I think that's going to be huge in terms of, everybody wants to see points. And I think that's just like another aspect of the new game that is going to, give offenses more of an opportunity to do so. So. I know myself, so I'm definitely excited. There's a lot of balls to be going around, and things like that, being added to the game is just another aspect that makes it. I think it's going to help the game out offensively, and make it fast paced and a lot of opportunities. So
absolutely. So you guys play Saturday against LA, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so what is your expectation for that first game? Like, how's the mood in the locker room? Are people excited? What is your guys' expectation for the first game and kind of for the season overall?
Oh yeah, I think it's probably I wanted to speak for my team home, but there's a lot of guys in the league that are either trying to prove they belong or prove to teams on the next level in NFL, whatever the goal is, that they're not done yet. So I would say for a lot of people, and speaking to, other ex-teammates, guys I played against, guys that are, on other teams, it's like, you're definitely excited for the opportunity. You're happy to be playing the game again, but I think everybody kind of has like that chip on their shoulder. So, I definitely a mixture of excitement and a bunch of other things. Finally getting able to play a game again for myself. It's been 2 seasons, so, yeah, I mean, you just, a lot of things go through your mind, but the end of the day, we're all here. We've all played at a high level before, and football is gonna always be football, regardless of what field you're playing on, or what team you're playing for. So.
And yeah, thank you for pointing that out. I think that's something very important to think about when it comes to the XFL, that you don't really have the veterans that can get complacent. Because in the NFL, you have guys who are very established, they have their guaranteed contracts. For the most part, they have job security, and there's not much that they can do to mess that up in terms of their performance on the field. Whereas in the XFL, I feel like no matter how competitive the team is, all of the players on that team are going to be extremely competitive because, like you said, they have chips on their shoulders. They're trying to prove that they still have what it takes to play in the NFL. So I really do think that's a very good point, that there's going to be a lot more competitiveness inherently because of the nature of the XFL than you might spend a given Sunday in the NFL.
Yeah.
And I think that's very cool.
Yeah, for sure. And I know on my team alone, at least, like, we still have guys, battling for positions, and we're we're away from a game in, a couple days. So I think it just goes to show, it's like just a bunch of talent in this league. Like, even guys who didn't, maybe get that opportunity to play in the NFL or CFL, it's just like, it goes to show there's a lot of guys that switch the crack. So, I mean, like I said, every day we wake up, we come in knowing, thinking, even at this point, this is my job. I know, especially in my receiver group, it's just a super, super talented room. Everybody has things that they do really, really well, and things that, kind of help us all separate and stand out. So, I mean, I feel like it's going to be a week-to-week battle for us all. So.
Absolutely. I think that's going to be very similar across the entire league. That I've been watching online. People are doing fantasy drafts. They're kind of creating their own leagues for the XFL. And nobody really knows who to pick necessarily because a lot of depth charts haven't even been released. And like you said, there's going to be a lot of week-to-week basis of, depending on the team, there's so many different skill types in the league. But there's going to be a lot of changing, a lot of ebb and flow to who's going to be playing. So I think the last question I have for you is, obviously, your career goal is to play in the NFL. I think that's kind of given for most people who are playing in the XFL. There may be a few exceptions, of course, always. But I think for most guys, like you said, they want to prove that they can still play in the NFL. So the question for you is, what are your career goals and kind of your aspirations outside of football? So once you're done playing football, whenever that day may come, what does Ray want to do outside of football?
I definitely want to be involved with not necessarily just student athletes, but I more so the youth or college level students. I want to be able to talk to people, whether it be just be someone that, like, I hate to say kind of like of a counselor or things like that, but when I was in college, I had an opportunity to do an internship, and there was a department called the life skills department, and I was tasked with kind of helping create this, new group on campus, and it dealt with like diversity and inclusion, and we talked about things that isn't the norm that for people to talk about, not just in college, but as student athletes. Like, in NCAA, you don't hear too much about, support for, mental illness or anxiety and things like that, because we're all, we're supposed to be like the gladiators of the world. You're athletes. You're not supposed to be dealing with certain things that, other people deal with. And the reality is, sports it can tear people down. And I know so many people, and myself personally, like, you just hold your tongue because you're not supposed to be the person that's dealing with those types of things. So, when I got the opportunity to do that and I was able to hear other people kind of like testimonies and things like that, I was like, this is definitely something that I want to do moving forward, just kind of, speak to people, what, like I said, kind of older groups and things like that, but in regards, whoever needs to hear something or needs a shoulder for anything, that's definitely something I want to kind of make a career of mine. So.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. That's absolutely something that needs to be talked about more in sports. And I know the NBA has started talking about it a little bit. There were a couple players, uh, DeMar DeRozan being one of them, that have come out and expressed their struggles with mental health issues in the past. But definitely, I think football specifically is a sport that you guys are expected to just be the toughest of everyone in the world and not show the hardships that you go through, and I mean putting your body through all of that, and you know better than I do the struggles physically and mentally that you have to go through preparing for games every week and all of that. So I definitely think whenever you're done playing football, Ray, there will definitely be a place for you. In a university or wherever you want to go, there will be a place for you to help out kids with that, and we'll be very grateful for that.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So I think that is all I have for you today. Is there anything else you would like to ask? This episode is kind of just going to be me introducing all of the different players we're going to be following throughout the season. So if there's anything else you would like people to know about you or about your past and why you're in the XFL, this would be the time to let everyone know that.
Oh man, anything you know about me? I mean, I guess I could just say I definitely look forward to being, not just a player this season, but a person that people, want to like get to know and root for and things like that. So, and I would like for it to be, bigger than, the game of football. So like I said, I'm huge on like building those relationships and trying to be, active and present in the communities that I've played for. That's something I've always taken pride on. So, I would definitely like my face to be known for things like that. So, and hopefully I'm, out making big plays during the season. Couple fantasy teams out there.
So the first question I have for you is pretty simple. It is, why did you start playing football? Kind of what got you into it? Where does your passion come from when it comes to the sport of football?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can remember as early as, 4 or 5 years old, just playing catch with my dad and, doing like one-on-one stuff with my brother, my younger brother. Like 5 years old, and that kind of translated into flag football, and then that translated into rec league tackles and Pop Warner, middle school ball, high school, college, and here I am now. So it was probably my dad that got me into it at a young age, and then it's taken off since then.
Okay, so kind of going along with that, can you talk to me about your career arc? So obviously, like you said, you started out playing flag football, transitioned middle school, high school, college, and now you're here. Can you talk to me a little bit more specifically about any challenges that you have gone through and all of the different opportunities you've had that have led you to playing in the XFL for the Guardians?
Sure. Coming out of high school, I was committed to Louisville, and that was before my senior year in June. And long story short, they ended up taking away my scholarship offer 2 days before signing day. So long story short, I ended up going to Wake Forest. Super thankful for that. Super thankful for, just the opportunity that I had to even play Division I football. In spite of what had happened 2 days before signing day. That was definitely a challenge in itself, trying to figure out, where I was going to play, if teams still had spots, this and that, yada yada. And even then, at Wake Forest had encountered some difficulties early on, with going 3-9, my first year and not seeing the field as much as I wanted to. Saw a little bit more the next year. Winning a bowl game. Junior year, was really close on leaving, transferring. Made up my mind that I was going to, but after staying up all night praying, ended up decided to stick it out and had the game of my life up to then against none other than Louisville, and hadn't looked back since then in terms of my career. Did some pretty memorable things. Made a lot of memories with teammates, and I'm very thankful for everything that university and that my teammates and coaches taught me. Came out as a free agent in this past year's draft. Came in a free agent and signed a deal with the Los Angeles Rams, free agent deal. And that also taught me a great deal. Just the challenge of being a free agent back, and just the challenge every day that football brings. I met it head on. It was really cool to be around those guys and learn a lot from just everybody that was in the room. Learned a lot from Todd. Learned a lot from the other vets, Malcolm. But obviously things didn't work out, and I was released coming out of preseason. Again, super thankful for the opportunity and everything that it taught me. Definitely became a better football player, best person because of it. Really learned how to even more so use my time efficiently and intentionally. And now we're here. Now we're a week away from kickoff, and I'm pumped. I'm pumped. Just really stoked for Sunday.
Well, that's fantastic. It seems like from all of the people I've talked to, a lot of guys are very excited about the XFL. So my next question would be, it seems like you've had a lot of challenges, obviously expecting your senior year to go to Louisville and then having that opportunity taken away from you, signing with the Rams and not being able to play in the regular season with them. So what lessons have you learned from those experiences that you're going to be able to take into the XFL that maybe other guys don't have?
I'd say that one thing that I've really learned and that's really stuck with me is there's certain things that you can't control in life. There's things that you have no control over no matter what you do. It's completely out of your hands. So first and foremost, I tell myself this every day, just control what you can control, and that's how you prepare, what you put into it. It's how you eat, it's how you sleep, it's how you study, it's how you practice. It's just, so that's all you control. All you can control is your input. All you can control is your input, and that just sets yourself up to have a great output. That just gives you a chance when it's time to perform. There's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of things you can't control. There's a lot of outside factors, whether it be, a coach or whatever, whether it be, some God forbid injury, whether it be, whatever it is. I mean, there's only so much that we can control, and that's just how we prepare. So when our name is called, when we get that opportunity to perform, we're in the best position, to perform at a high level. And that's one thing that's come up more and more as I've gotten older, and I've seen it more and more, and it's starting to show itself more and more, and that's just something that probably the biggest thing that I've learned throughout my years being in the game, and it also trickles into life, into every other area of life. Things you can't control, but you can control how you prepare and what you put into it.
Absolutely, and I think better than anyone, it's a game and an industry, not just football or not just the XFL, just professional sports in general, that something can be taken away from you very quickly, and I think that's something that a lot of professional athletes, I don't want to judge, but I think some people don't understand and maybe take it for granted, and then the game's taken away from them, like you said, maybe an injury, God forbid, or something like that happens, and I think it's important to have that mindset so that you can carry it over to other things in life that don't just apply to football. So kind of along that, obviously anyone who's playing football, I mean any kid who plays football in their front yard, they dream to go to the NFL, and obviously you were with the Rams, I assume that's a dream you still have. But if you could, what are your career aspirations outside of football, or once you unfortunately have to be done playing the game?
Right. That's a really good question. This game is, they say the NFL stands for not for long, and that is very true. I mean, the average year, the average lifespan for a running back is somewhere around 3 years, maybe less than that, in the National Football League. So, it's crucial, it's imperative to have a plan B, to have, something else that you're passionate about, that you would like to turn into a career. And, there's a few things that I would like to do. One of my passions is music, singing, writing, recording, producing, engineering, etc. It's something I've been doing singing since I was, my mom said since I was 2 years old. I was in an honors chorus, district wide honors chorus. I recorded a little bit in high school with some friends. Kind of got serious when I was in college. And then, I invested in my own home studio, that I could really just, take on the go anywhere I go. Actually have it with me right now, but, once football ends, definitely will still be doing music. And heck, I'm still doing music now. Love to maybe get in maybe some type of broadcasting, maybe something with cybersecurity. I did computer science at Wake Forest for 6 semesters, so I have a little bit of background there. Maybe something with, cybersecurity, or maybe software dev, something along those lines. But I definitely feel like I have a few things in mind of what I would like to do.
Well, it's very impressive. Again, something I've kind of seen is, a lot of people focus on, they call Division I athletes student athletes a lot of the time, but most people don't really ever ask about things that these student athletes are actually studying while they're in college. And I talked to another player in the XFL, and he said that one of the things he wants to do after he retires is he wants to do a lot of coaching. He's been coaching for his high school, and he studied business management and sports management when he was in college. So I definitely think that you studying computer science, I think that's fantastic, and it's very important to have backup plans, not just as an athlete, but in general.
Once again, that was Matthew Colburn II, running back for the New York Guardians. Something that I really enjoyed talking to Matthew about was his hardships. And what you heard was Matthew was committed to Louisville and was ultimately unable to fulfill that commitment. And I think that's something that really shaped his playing career. He got some time with the Rams, and from talking to him on and off the record, that's something that I think has really shaped his game. He learned from Todd Gurley. He learned from the veterans on that Rams team that ultimately ended up going to the Super Bowl. And I think that's something that has shaped the way that Matthew's going to be playing his game. And personally, I think that's why he's one of the people that we really should be looking out for on the New York Guardians. While Matthew may not be very high on the depth chart for the New York Guardians, they actually released the depth charts today. I think that because of the fast-paced nature of the game and how hard Matthew works, he is going to be rising on that depth chart. He's going to get a lot more opportunities to play than I think people perceive that he's going to get. And personally, I'm rooting for him. So thank you to Matthew for coming on the show. And I really enjoyed hearing his story. And moving forward, I think that's something we need to keep in mind is the history of what Matthew has gone through, the work that he has put in to get to where he is today. And I think that's very impressive, and I commend Matthew for that work. So now that we know about our three players, it's time to start wrapping up this week's episode. The way I want to do that is kind of give you guys my final thoughts, opinions, and some of my predictions and analysis of how I think that the XFL is going to go during this season. So Vegas opened their odds recently with the Dallas Renegades and New York Guardians both tied as favorites to win the championship as 4-1 odds favorites. The Seattle Dragons and St. Louis Battlehawks are tied for the worst odds at 14-1. And then the DC Defenders, LA Wildcats, and Tampa Bay Vipers all are at 9-2, with the Roughnecks being the odd man out at 12-1 odds to win the championship. I think one of the interesting things will be the fact that they're split up into two divisions, East and West. However, with a 10-game regular season, they're going to be playing everybody a lot. So they're going to be playing those people in their division a couple games. They're going to be playing everybody else in the league. And then with East-West Championship and then finally the XFL Championship, it's a very interesting format. And I think for the 8 teams that they have in the XFL, it's a format that's going to be very successful. Now, as for my predictions, nobody really has enough context for these teams in order to truly make an accurate prediction. I think one of the reasons the Dallas Renegades are picked to be the favorite is because, like I talked about earlier, with the combination of Landry Jones and Bob Stoops, two people that have somewhat worked together in the past, especially due to the fact that Landry Jones was actually at Oklahoma, a system that Bob Stoops built a couple years ago. I think that's something that's going to be very successful for that Dallas Renegades team. However, like I said earlier, this is a complete unknown. Nobody knows how this league is going to go, and if it all goes poorly, it could end up like the AAF, and the XFL might not even finish their inaugural season. Well, obviously, because I'm running an XFL podcast, I don't want that to happen. That is always a possibility with an alternative football league. However, something I want to mention along those lines is I think one of the reasons the AAF and football leagues like the Canadian Football League haven't flourished like I believe there is a market for them too is because they don't have the support of the NFL. Now, recently, Roger Goodell was asked about the XFL, and Roger Goodell is the commissioner of the NFL. And before the last couple weeks, Goodell was very hesitant to comment on the XFL. But recently, before the Super Bowl during Media Week, he actually commented and basically said that he hopes the XFL does well because for the simple reason that if the XFL does well, that means more people are interested in football. And I think that brings up one of the big possibilities for the XFL and one of the biggest positives that could occur for the XFL. So the biggest positive occurrence that I think could happen for the XFL, and basically their best case scenario is for them to become a pseudo minor league system. If you think about it in baseball terms, a minor league system for the NFL. Now, where I think this could work is, let's say Landry Jones goes out and this season he carries the Dallas Renegades to the championship, and it is clear that he is the reason that this team won the XFL championship. I think absolutely after this season, going into training camp of 2020 for the NFL, I believe Landry Jones would be picked up, and most likely he could find a starting spot in the NFL, if not absolutely a backup spot on an NFL team. Whereas in 2018, he was cut by the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he was not somebody that was really wanted by the NFL, obviously now that he's playing in the XFL. So I think that's somewhere that people who shine in the XFL, it's giving the NFL a venue for which to view the potential talent pool that otherwise they're just looking at workouts. And while people can hold workouts at their high school football field and they can invite NFL scouts, I think it's much better for those NFL scouts to see them in pure game speed action, which is absolutely different than any workout system and any workout scenario you can manufacture. So personally, I think that's pretty much the best case scenario for the XFL. They become a minor league system for the NFL, or they become a G League, if you want to think about it in that way. And I think that's somewhere where the XFL could really flourish, and that partnership between Vince McMahon and Roger Goodell could actually flourish even further, and the XFL could be profitable. Now, the last thing I want to comment on before we wrap up today is the XFL financially stable? And Vince McMahon commented a couple months ago and said that he's willing to invest upwards of $500 million over the first 3 years of this league. Now, I believe that will be feasible, and I believe that the XFL financially will be able to stay afloat because of the deep pockets that Vince McMahon has. And because of that, I think the league will have time to employ their marketing tactics, which, as I talked about earlier, with the big social media following they already have. And that's just the XFL personal accounts. I didn't even delve into all of the followers that these teams have. People across the country are going on social media asking, oh, I'm a Green Bay Packers fan, I'm a Seattle Seahawks fan, I am a New England Patriots fan. Which XFL team should I root for? And I think that's something, it's very exciting. I talked to a couple of my friends personally on campus, and they were super excited that there was another football league. They got to keep watching football, and they went and looked at the uniforms of the XFL teams. They looked at some of the names of the players, and they picked pretty much randomly what team they wanted to follow, but they were so excited about it, and they loved the idea that there was this new startup football league, and they, from the beginning, could pick a team that was their team without any other bias. They don't have to worry about the teams that their parents like. They don't have to worry about the teams that other people in the area like, because in Illinois, we don't have a team. Closest team is St. Louis, but my friends picked the Dallas Renegades, and they picked the Seattle Dragons, pretty much just because of the names and the uniforms. But that's something that people who aren't normally invested in the NFL, this is a new league. I believe they have the marketing capabilities, they have the deep pockets, and they have the market to delve into and to actually draw from in order to be successful. So the last thing I want to mention today before I sign off on examining the XFL is the format we're going to be following from now on. So today, like I said, and like you saw, was a lot of introductory. You were getting to know these three players. You were getting to know Cole, Matthew, and Ray. And I think that's the most important thing moving forward, is to have that in the back of your mind whenever I'm talking to them. However, in the coming weeks, pretty much the format I'm going to follow is at the beginning of the episode, we'll do a little bit of a Sports Center type preview or recap, of the games that happened. So the 4 games the week before, I'm going to give you some highlights, some stats. And then after that, we're going to jump into some interviews with those players. Hopefully in the future, I have some guests in line that are going to be coming on the show, some big name guests that are going to be bringing their thoughts and insights to the league, people that are more experienced than me in the industry and have dealt much longer with the game of football than I have, and I'm very excited about that. Also, we're gonna try to get some other players on here so you can hear some different voices. Not that Ray, Matthew, and Cole are not absolutely fantastic, but I think getting some fresh voices on here will be absolutely fantastic. So that's kind of the format we're gonna follow. After we get some interviews from the players, then I'll do some previews of the next week in coalition with the thoughts we got from the players themselves and what they think is going to happen the next week. Do a little bit of preview, look at the stats, look at the matchups, and as this series goes along, as the XFL grows and develops, I think it'll be a lot easier to make some predictions, and it'll be a lot more exciting and a lot more fun because we're going to have a lot more to work with. So I would like to thank all of you for listening. This is the first time really I've done a project like this, and I am very excited about it. So for those of you listening, if you have made it this far, thank you for listening to me ramble for as long as I have, and thank you for listening to the interviews of these players. If there's anything I can improve upon, or if there's anything you'd like to hear in the coming weeks, anybody you want me to try to get on this show, I cannot guarantee anything, obviously, but I would love to take any feedback that anybody has to throw at me. Obviously, I would like it to be constructive and as nice as possible, but I will take any feedback that any of the listeners have for me, because I want to make this show as beneficial and as best as I can for you guys listening, because ultimately I'm creating content for you guys, and as much as I like talking about football, I want you to enjoy listening to what I'm talking about. So this is MJ Hurley signing off on Examining the XFL, episode 1, previewing the debut of the XFL. This is February 7th, 2020, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.